Welcome back and thank you for staying with Checkpoint. It's finally the second hour of the show, all to do with analysis of the week's top developments and what a week it has been. From the forays at the 78th United Nations General Assembly in New York, the United States of America, we've definitely seen Kenya's representation on the global stage. But what exactly does it mean for Kenya back at home? Are we getting a return of investment at the end of the day? Apart from that, we'll equally take a look at some of the local politics that has played out in the country. From the Cabinet Secretary for Trade, Moses Kuria's insensitive remarks, the sarcastic apology thereafter, and what followed in terms of various cabinet secretaries making their way to make sure that things are flowing under their ministries. We'll equally take a look at the developments happening under devolution, from Kawira Mwangaza's wars in Meru County to the Senate Mashinani that is set to kickstart tomorrow in Lodwar. We'll definitely keep you updated about that. Allow me to introduce my panelists, not new faces to the show. First of all, Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst. I hope you had a fantastic week.
I can't complain.
Were you in New York or you are here?
I was in New York. Of course, I'm kidding.
Okay, virtually, yeah. Okay, it's good to see you. Equally joined by Hesbon Owila, communication strategist. I hope you had a fantastic week.
It was good.
Can't complain.
Yes.
At Nabeya Mafuta.
Tunangangana.
He has an oil well.
Oh, he's not an oil well. He took the advice from the cabinet secretary. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you for your time. I'd like us to begin with Ruto taking on the world, because just this week we saw the president take to the global stage. He's been championing the continent's course during the week-long United Nations General Assembly in the United States. He equally capped off the visit with multi-billion shillings deals for Kenya, one of them being the Development Finance Corporation that is set to avail more than 127 billion shillings rather to Kenyan companies to fund health systems, SME development, among other initiatives. Equally, President William Ruto spoke to Kenya's intention to lead the multinational force in Haiti to combat the rising gang warfare in the Caribbean nation. And actually, the US President Joe Biden spoke on this. Let's listen in to what he had to say briefly.
The United Nations must continue to preserve peace, prevent conflict, and alleviate human suffering. And we embrace nations stepping up to lead new ways and to seek new breakthroughs on hard issues. For example, on Haiti, the Caribbean community is facilitating a dialogue among Haitian society. I thank President Ruto of I thank him for his willingness to serve as the lead nation of a UN-backed security support mission. I call on the Security Council to authorize this mission now. The people of Haiti cannot wait much longer.
Okay, so it goes without saying how important global solidarity is and the spirit of multilateralism. So, Dismas, briefly, your take, or rather your takeaway from the week-long United Nations General Assembly and Kenya's presence in that assembly.
Well, I don't think you can look at UNGA in isolation. Is that to look at President Ruto's foreign policy from the time he took office.
Okay.
And you see a president who is very active and having high-level representations, because he's done so many international visits, and we are beginning to see those fruits. Because in the past, during the Kibaki administration, as well as Kenyatta administration, Kenya was not a big player at the global level. And one felt that our neighbors were having our lunch, our neighbors were having our cake, that is Tanzania and Rwanda. But now with President Ruto, is very proactive, and it's at the highest level of representation. It's at President Ruto himself, or his Deputy Rigathi Gachagua, or Musalia Mudavadi. In fact, Musalia Mudavadi has attended many inaugurations of presidents who've just won elections, and you see them coming up with very solid MOUs. And when you crystallize those MOUs, there are three things. Number one, they're promoting Kenya as an FDI destination. So meaning that we'll get a lot of people coming to do business in Kenya. And in the globalization of markets and production, Kenya is an awesome place to come and do business. And then secondly, promoting our exports. In fact, if we do a lot of exports, then our shilling will not be having this pressure, because now we'll be having a lot of forex. Okay. And then also number 3, promoting our talent. And our talent has been lying idle. And Owile is a teacher at the university. He will tell you that Kenya's human capital is probably the best in the world. But you know, they are lying idle in Kenya. We are not taking advantage of globalization. And what now the Kenya Kwanza has been doing is promoting Kenya's human capital. And I'm really hoping that Kenya Kwanza can even make a mandatory studying of many languages, that instead of just speaking English and Kiswahili, they should make it mandatory for us to study French or Spanish, so that we can really play in the global village. And India offers a very good template. You remember during the G20 meeting in India, the Prime Minister of India, obviously is Indian, but the Prime Minister of UK has got Indian DNA, and the World Bank President has got Indian DNA. Can you imagine that if Kenyans had a very proactive policy, so that in future when you go to international meetings, you have the Kenyan President who is Kenyan, and then you have the US President who is Kenyan, and a South African Minister who is Kenyan, so that we champion our agenda. And at this stage, I think we now need to look at those MOUs and make sure that they're now delivering value for Kenyan. Because again, in the past, if you go to foreign affairs, there are many MOUs gathering dust. But we need now to be sure that the MOUs being signed here translates to increased FDI, exporting Kenyan talents, and catalyzing exports, tea, coffee, horticulture, and everything else. Okay,
so Owila, Kenya is definitely open for business, and the Kenya Kwanza administration has been keen on marketing Kenya on the global stage. But even as you add your voice in terms of your takeaways from the UNGA, what do you make of Kenya's readiness in terms of opening its borders to business, especially on the cost of doing business in the country? Because that's one of the impeding factors that might be working against the Kenya Kwanza administration. The cost of electricity, cost of doing business. How do we strike a balance?
Well, I think what the president has succeeded in doing is to assert himself on the global stage. I mean, he came into the presidency as a very greenhorn, probably very unknown, and he had very big shoes to fill, because President Uhuru Kenyatta was like a global superstar of sort, with a taller-than-life kind of image. And I think the biggest challenge is not what Kenya has. The biggest challenge is how does the government leverage on what Kenya has to bring in as much foreign direct investment as possible. Because just like the American ambassador said at the Devolution Conference, I think Kenya has almost everything going. I mean, we are the tech hub in the region. The level of tech innovation and innovation in almost every aspect in Kenya is just amazing. I mean, there are young entrepreneurial Kenyans who are setting up startups almost every other day. And then if you look at our education system, I think our education system has produced some of the best human resource capital that you can get in the region and exported globally. The biggest challenge, as you've said, is the cost of doing business in Kenya. And that's why I'm saying, once the president has mapped himself outside there as one of the most conspicuous voices of development and consciousness in Africa, the attraction of people who would be interested in coming to Kenya would then, elicit conversations around the cost of doing business in Kenya, the cost of electricity, the tax regime that we have in this country, not just the tax on employees, but even the cost of just doing business in terms of before you set up a business enterprise in Kenya, how many requirements do you have to meet? And then with the endemic corruption that we know, I mean, at what point, do you start your business? And how much do you have to part with before you start that business? I think those are conversations that have to be addressed here for these international forays to make sense, or for them to translate into foreign direct investment or investments that would help Kenyans. And I think, if you look at what has been happening, I think Parliament, which is dominated by the Kenya Kwanza legislators, is actually considering, tinkering around with the corporation tax, the corporate tax, and I mean, it runs away from the Kenya Kwanza, and the Hustler Nation kind of campaign agenda that, sought to elevate mtu wa chini, because mtu wa chini now has like 1,001 taxes, especially the ones who are salaried and have dependents who don't have payslips. So, I mean, we are dealing with how to address the issues of the common mwananchi so much by drawing revenues from the common mwananchi, to the point where there has to be something has to happen. There has to be someone who is coming on board to expand that tax bracket. So those conversations around, taxing, companies that set up shop here are now the next frontier of conversations. But let me just say this, that, having a president who, is all over the globe, a government that keeps sending its cabinet secretaries all over the world, and we see them, I mean, it has become a world of showbiz, so pictures are everywhere, and instantaneous communication is one thing. Having conversation with investors is one thing. But to what extent are we talking about, a political class that is asserting itself on the global stage and investments that are trickling down? I am pretty sure that if what Dismas is saying is true, if there is a lot of foreign direct investment that is trickling in, wouldn't be having issues that we have with the dollar that has depreciated to the tune of 23%, And I'm pretty sure that if all this meant something tangible for Kenyans, then the government would be, at the forefront trying to, showcase what is coming in. Okay. My thinking is coming at the backdrop of the control of budgets revelation of, the officers that are spending a lot of money, in travel, hospitality, and these are folks who are gobbling billions of shillings, while at the same time taxing the common mwananchi. You'd expect that for these trips and the amount of money that we spend on these trips as taxpayers, they do some sort of an analysis just to tell us what is the cost-benefit analysis, what is the return on investment, how many deals have been signed, and to what extent are these deals going to create jobs? Who is coming in to do what kind of business? And in the next 3-4 years, what concessions are we giving them? What are we getting out of that? I am pretty sure that if all these trips meant, that you're going to address the plight of the common mwananchi in this country, they would be talking about it. So from where I sit, they've not talked about it. They've not given us a clear indication of what all these things mean. Either they want to shock us once, or there's absolutely nothing they have. Absolutely. They globetrot, and it doesn't seem to be serving the interest of Kenyans.
That's interesting. You mentioned the Control of Budgets report, which actually highlighted that government gobbled 14 billion on travel in the 9 months that ended March this year, that being the highest in a similar period in at least 5 years. So, Dismas, and on return of investment, how do you view the appetite of foreign trips with lucrative DMs, vis-a-vis the return on investment? Are we getting value at the end of the day?
Well, in the space of FDI, or promoting exports, both human capital and the fiscal goods, it's not instant coffee, as Owila would suggest, that you make a trip to London today and then you get coffee immediately. It takes a process. But let's look at some of the 3 high-profile visits. First of all, when the president was in the US, he met with global giants in the fintech space. He met with Apple, Google, and all of them were struggling to have a conversation with him, telling him he want to come to Nairobi to do business. I was very excited when I saw Safaricom, a Kenyan brand, in the same room with those global giants. It means that we are making substantial progress. And during the same visit, you saw the richest people in the world. You saw Elon Musk, you saw Michael Bloomberg and Bill Gates wanting to have a conversation with President Ruto. You're going to get a return on investment from there. And then for people who love sports, the NBA Africa has indicated that they want to put up a business in Nairobi. So for people who are interested in basketball, I'm sure they're already doing press-ups and they want to do amazing business. One of the key architects of that meeting, I don't follow sports, but I understand, he made South Sudan do amazing stuff at the international level within 3 years, meaning he can do the same thing in Kenya. Let's look at the deputy president. He went to Colombia to find out how can we get more money to give to our farmers. That is something that people who are brought up on coffee are going to be very excited. Look at Salem Davide. Recently, he went to the UK. to study the railway infrastructure and also find out how we are going to do it, how we are going to have it in Nairobi to address the transport concerns in Nairobi. The average Kenyan spends about 1.5 hours in the morning and in the evening, so 3 hours in a day going to work and going home. Now, if these trips can offer a solution, why should we be complaining about that? So for me, I think all these things are the right things, but if you are expecting instant coffee, as a Wheeler would expect, then there's going to be a challenge. And in my view, we need to now, having signed all those MOUs, I think now we need a register or another office created of MOUs to find out whether Kenyans, in fact, appreciate the import of these MOUs and they're utilizing those MOUs. Now, from an accounting perspective, you can justify any expense. You can say this is too much, but how do you place a value on a meeting between President Kenyatta, Bill Gates, and Michael Bloomberg? I mean, how do you place a value? You wait for the return on investment. Even when Salim David was in the UK, there was a stampede of all the international media, including Bloomberg, BBC, all of them wanting to interview him to find out what is happening in Kenya, to the extent that even President Biden has noticed that Kenya is now up and running. In fact, our neighbors in Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, on social media, they were envious. They were saying that President Ruto and President Kagame are having quality meetings, while the delegation from Uganda is having low quality meetings, meaning that our neighbors have just discovered that Kenya is up and running. And for me, I'm really excited about this. But now we must make sure that Wheeler's graduates are ready for globalization. Let's look at this language. Make sure that when you complete high school, you speak French or Arabic, having intercultural competence so that we take advantage of all these variables.
So it's not instant coffee.
It's not instant coffee. If you want instant coffee, you can go to Kisi. Kisi has got a special brand of coffee called Omosike, which is instant. But if you want to brew coffee, you have to be patient.
Just, I think maybe this verse is wowed by the razzmatazz. Now, this is what happens in most of these bilateral discussions. By the time a president gets to a room, into a discussion with potential investors or other presidents from other countries, there's a lot of paperwork that has already been done. So that's why there are cabinet secretaries, there are commercial attaches in some of these other countries, there are technology attaches, educational attaches. They are there to do the agreements. So this idea of instant coffee, I think, is probably debasing the conversation. No one expects the return on investment to be seen immediately. But the mere fact that a head of state, a CEO, commits into an agreement means that enough of the paperwork has already been done. And by the time they come to the global media or even the local media, because, I mean, it's a global thing, but when we consume it here in Kenya, consume it through our media, whatever has been done has already set up, the framework. Otherwise, no serious CEO, no serious, head of state would get into a meeting to start the nitty-gritties to tell us that it is not instant coffee. Now, what are we talking about when we say there's need to have a pathway of what then happens after all these agreements have been put in place? I mean, the deputy president went to Colombia. He's still struggling. Even yesterday, I think he was making a lot of noise about the coffee sector.
Even today.
Even today, he was making a lot of... 2 weeks ago, I was in South America, Buenos Aires. I can tell you, I mean, there's nothing economically viable that we can exchange between Kenya and Colombia as far as coffee is concerned. That one I can tell you without any fear of contradiction. First of all, that distance, there are so many markets that we can tap on, Then number two, if these deals, and I'm not saying that there are no deals. What I'm just saying is, and we are not expecting them to manifest their return on investment in the next 6 months or even 1 year. But what is the pathway? What are we talking about? What is the agreement that has been made? What is the preparation that is being put in place? The difference between most of these, countries that are emerging, like Kenya, emerging economies, and China, and what China has done, because there is serious documentation. You don't go into a deal trying to negotiate without a serious framework that is put in place. How has China managed to develop most of its cities that 20, 30 years ago were villages? You know, they did research. Yeah. That before you invest in a commercial sector in a city, you've done enough research to the point where you know that this is what is viable in this region. This is the capacity that we need to build in this region. Okay. Now, let us assume that in Kenya we have that capacity. So for all these deals, now, what do we have? What do we have to say that now the tech giants, Apple, you know, Elon Musk, for instance, and Dismas has mentioned all of them. What do we have to say that they're coming to invest in 1, 2, 3? You know, what plans are there in place? At least we used to see this with the first and the second Jubilee government. They would have these deals and they would have a conversation. This is what we are putting up. Conquer City. They were giving us a blueprint. Okay. You know, the opening up of the Mao Summit that now has been taken over by the French government. I don't know whether it will go on. I mean, we were seeing pathways, you know. But as we speak right now, we are not expecting any instant coffee. It doesn't happen like that. And I think Kenyans are alive to that fact. But at least we need to see some sort of documentation that shows that there is a potential return on investment. Simply because by the time a president sits on a deal, there is like 95% of the paperwork, the agreement that has been done. Okay. But we are not seeing that.
That's interesting. So, Dismas, as you come in, equally talk about this Haiti police intervention, because Kenyans might be asking, we have our insecurity issues in the country. Why are we trying to sort out outside while we can't sort our own right here?
Yes, so just a quick response. I just want to buttress what Willa has indicated. For some of these mega investors, like say philanthropists, people like Bill Gates or Michael Bloomberg, they've got a very solid understanding of Kenya. So by the time they want to make an investment decision, they've done all the analysis, the net present value, and they're happy to come to Kenya. But the only thing now they want is the political commitment. And the political commitment comes from the head of state. President Ruto saying that I'm welcoming you to come to Kenya. And if he doesn't make it, then he will send his deputy or the prime cabinet secretary. It's only commitment. And Will has hit the nail on the head that the president doesn't go into a room for brainstorming session. Then it means that he doesn't have a system. The system works. In fact, those meetings don't last for more than 15 minutes. Because those investors just want to look at the president in the eye and get his commitment. Then they sign deals. They say it's nice doing business. See you in Nairobi. Like, for instance, I understand NBA Africa have said they'll have an office in Nairobi before the year comes to an end. And they're looking for a piece of land. So I hope it's going to be available. Now, coming to this name, you know, it's very, from my village, I can't pronounce it. Haiti. Let me say Haiti. Yeah. Okay. My understanding is that the law enforcement officers from Kenya will not be patrolling the streets in that capital in the middle of the night with a flashlight that they're looking for guns. You know, guns, or they're looking for people with knives. No, they're going to offer capacity building. That is my understanding, that they'll offer capacity building, and Kenya has got experience in offering capacity building. Some time ago I saw media reports that Kenya offered capacity building for the government of South Sudan. They offered capacity building for the Somali police. And we've got the National Defense University in Kenya, which does capacity building for many people, even including first world countries. So that is my understanding. And in my view, if there's an opportunity for anybody from Kenya, be it a KDF, National Intelligence Service, Kenya Police, AP, whoever it is, that they can go outside and do capacity building, please, let's go. Because let's go and shine all over the world. I mean, why should we be limited? I mean, you know, the reasoning some Kenyans are saying that, wait a minute, there are pickpockets in Kenya. So why are you sending Kenya police to go to Haiti? I think that is a logic which is upside down. If we have capacity in Kenya, and we do, and the United Nations says, President Ruto, can you have law enforcement officers going to it to offer capacity building? Why not? Let's take the next flight.
Interesting. Let's shift focus to Mafuta matters. And in the wake of the all-time high fuel prices that were announced by the government, CS Kuria said fuel prices in the country will continue to rise by at least 10 shillings every month until February next year, coupled with a couple of unprintable words that sparked uproar among Kenyans who found his remarks rather insensitive. He apologized, of course, because human is to error. But Owila, what do you make? And we've talked about this time and time again in terms of how a cabinet secretary should conduct himself. And I think the obvious question would be, were these remarks insensitive from where you sit, or is it just an issue of, we've been cultured in terms of honest men? Was he just saying an honest, bitter truth that Kenyans found hard to swallow? What do you make of it?
I think we've talked about, the responsibility that leaders have. I mean, whether he was honest or not, leaders and politicians, for that matter, need to understand that words are symbols, and they need to be symbols of, aspirations, symbols that Kenyans, can get some encouragement from. Dismas, I know, will say hope is not a strategy. But sometimes you need, a citizenry that is not disillusioned, a citizenry that knows that there is a better tomorrow. And I think, if you look at the words of most of the politicians, most of the leaders who are entrusted with shaping the destiny of this country, both politically and economically, I think in the last 1 week, since the increase in the price of the cost of fuel has not been encouraging. I think Moses Kuria is just one of them. We are used to Moses Kuria, So whether he was saying the truth or not, I think it was just in bad taste, and it tells you the extent to which the leaders that we have are out of touch with reality. It doesn't matter whether the situation is going to get worse. What you need as a leader, and the reason why we give them power, is to work to alleviate any situation that is likely to be bad. Interestingly, is that even the person who was reprimanding Moses Kuria has, since they assumed office, never inspired any confidence. Not in folks who voted for Kenya Kwanza, and not in folks who voted for Azimio. Same to the lead economic advisor to this government, made very interesting statements. Suggesting that it could be trial and error that they're doing. It might work, it might not work. He even invoked, what happens in the medical world, that even doctors treat, but people still lose their lives, which doesn't make a lot of sense, And I happen to have read an article written by Professor Levi Obonyo from Daystar University about words that politicians should use. The reason why President Barack Obama, inspired a lot of hope, was because of the catchphrase that he had. A phrase that was very symbolic, of the aspirations that Americans were looking for back then. Yes, we can. Same to the phrase that Donald Trump used. Words are very critical, and leaders are known by, the conviction that they have in their speech in public. Because what happens is communication when made in public calls for a lot of commitment on the person who communicates. So if you listen to Moses Kuria make those statements that in the next 6 months it's going to be worse off, I'm telling you so that you start preparing, you don't blame anyone. It shows a lack of commitment on his side as a leader to try and create, a bearable, sort of situation out of the bad situation that they have seen as leaders, And if you ask Kenyans walking along the street, it is not rocket science. The cost of a barrel of fuel when President Uhuru Kenyatta wanted to increase VAT on fuel to 16% was 114 back then, and there was an uproar, and they settled on 8%. Today it is 90. It is 90 USD. And the cost of fuel has moved from 156 that it was back then to 213 today. So you can't tell me or you can't convince Kenyans that there is something that was being done by President Uhuru Kenyatta that President William Ruto cannot do, given the overwhelming mandate that he was given. And if we revisit the conversations that we had just before the election, when they were complaining, that people are adding the cost of fuel day and night, that when they get to power, they will deal with cartels, because the subsidy was essentially going to a cartel and marketers, was benefiting marketers. Now ask yourself, what was the cost of that? I mean, what was the amount of that subsidy? Okay. Let us assume that now there are no cartels. So where is that money going? You know, so when most of these politicians and leaders make some of these statements, I think they take Kenyans for granted, and then they make the situation that they were given the power to address look much worse than it is.
Well, politics is all about optics. Anyway, add your voice to this.
You know, for people who studied history, there's something referred to as the French Revolution. And there's a lady by the name, we are told, when you go through history, although they say the translation may not be accurate, called Maria Antoinette. Yeah. So people were in the street saying, can we get some bread? And then she said, what's wrong with these fellas?
Cakes?
If there's no bread, why can't you go and get cake? Meaning that this lady, from where she was seated, she did not appreciate the dynamics of morale. And in my view, the only reason why you are in office is to offer moral solutions, is not to describe the problems, because you've been given mandate to offer solutions. So anybody who occupies a position of leadership, be it the chairman of a local cattle dip, an MCA, an advisor, whichever position of leadership you have, you must remain sensitive to the people who have given you that responsibility. So it's unacceptable to speak in a manner which seems to be condescending or looking down upon your employers. Because essentially, when you occupy this public office and you make statements which are unpalatable and unacceptable to the society, it means you are treating your employers with contempt. Now, if you've been given a responsibility by President Ruto, Ruto was given power by Mura, Wanjiko, Nafula, and Kadzo. These people, you must treat them with respect. When you treat your bosses, employers with contempt, it means you don't have respect for your boss. Because Mura gave the president a mandate to solve problems in Kenya. He has given you a responsibility, delegated responsibility. Then you come and then you start talking down upon Mura. So what is Mura supposed to do back in Mosocho when you tell Mura that, wait a minute, go and take some energy drink and coffee, is going to get worse. So what is Mura supposed to do now? Go on top of a tree and hide, or what is she supposed to do? So in my view, people must be very careful. Okay. And also something that they must know is that with the advent of social media, every single word which comes out of your mouth, whether in public, whether in private, Mura will assume that is official policy. Okay. That is government communication. So even if you're cracking a joke, when Mura is running on an empty stomach, Mura will not differentiate a joke from a very serious statement. So it's important for all these people to remain, to respect Mura. You know, that's what Mura just wants. If things are thick, tell them that we are turning the corner. While I keep on saying every single day that hope is not a strategy, but give them an element so that when they go to sleep tonight, they can wake up tomorrow knowing that tomorrow is going to be a better day. Okay. Like for instance, there was a big meeting in Western Kenya today, organized by a young man called Fred. Fred Ikana is an MP. He brought people together and he did a massive fundraiser. And the message which came out is that while we appreciate that the cost of fuel is going up, but when you go back to your farm, there's going to be a bumper harvest. So the cost of Gorogoro is coming down. So at that stage, people can say, okay, maybe I can pay 10 bob more for a liter of fuel, but I'll get beans and I'll get maize, I'll have a meal. That is what leadership is all about. But this idea of going to the top of Mount Kenya and then vomiting on our shoes is unacceptable.
Well, leadership should inspire confidence at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
But Owila, and still on cabinet secretaries, just briefly, because we've seen this sort of approach where cabinet secretaries storm offices and workstations in their ministries to address administrative issues, some might call trivial. Perhaps with CS Kindiki at Nyayo House, the passport backlog. We saw the CS for transport going to NTSA and reading them the Riots Act. By this and this time, we need this and this processed. What do you make of this way of approach? Does it inspire confidence? Does it send a message that the system is broken down? Should cabinet secretaries focus on big issues and leave this to their juniors. Well, what do you make of it?
You know, I think if you look at those two cabinet secretaries that you've talked about, I think this appear to many Kenyans as the cabinet secretaries who are serious about what they are doing. And I think we need to run away from the risk of thinking that our country is broken and stop listening too much to Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, Grand Mullah. I mean, the bitterness he has.
He hasn't mentioned that.
I know he has not, but I think that is the genesis of this broken system, this issue of cabinet secretaries dealing with clerks who are like 15 levels beneath them. There's no problem if they deal with that, especially if you look at what was happening at Nyayo House. I mean, the passport, there are people who've lost opportunities simply because of the backlog. So I wouldn't fault a cabinet secretary who makes a critical statement by showing up and showing things up. I mean, it's the best way to tell people that it doesn't matter how below me you are, but we can have a conversation to deliver on the promises we made to Kenyans. So I mean, it's not sustainable. It's not like a cabinet secretary will every day walk and deal with clerical issues. But once in a while, you'd want a cabinet secretary who asserts, his authority, and gives Kenyans the confidence that if the guy at the top in this ministry has worked on this, desk with folks who are customer facing, then it means that when I go there, I should go with the confidence that he rained on them and they'll provide the services. I would say that it might not be sustainable, and it is not the end in itself, because after making such statements of intent, the best thing they would do for Kenyans is put a framework that would ensure that they don't have to come every day, but service is delivered.
Interesting view. All right, let's shift focus to devolution matters just briefly. And a lot is happening this week from Senate Mashinani that will be happening in Turkana County from 25th to the 29th, with the aim to enhance the interaction between the Senate and the people at the grassroots level. Apart from that, still on matters devolution, it seems the rain is back in Meru County. And this is after a caucus of 27 Kenya Kwanza members of County Assembly in Meru decided to initiate a fresh impeachment motion against Governor Kawira Mwangaza. Remember, this is not the first time she was saved by the Senate. It's less than a year since that time. And this time round, according to the MCAs, the impeachment has been triggered by wanton discrimination by the governor. Let's listen in briefly to what they had to say yesterday.
We have resolved to start a fresh impeachment motion to the governor of Meru, one Honorable Bishop Kawira Mwangaza, and we have already signed, appended our signatures, the 27 of us.
Now we are destined to reclaiming Meru, giving Meru its lost glory, so that whenever the name Meru is mentioned, that will be on a positive activity, or rather positive issue.
Well, interesting. Those are MCAs from Meru County allied to the Kenya Kwanza administration. So in these devolved units, when it rains, it pours. I remember one of the former governors who survived, is it 7 times impeachment, the Embu County governor. So he had 9 lives. I hope Kawira Mwangaza might have. But what do you make of the push and pull in Meru County?
You're saying you hope. Hope is not a strength. But let's look at contradictions first.
Yes.
If you go to Kiambu, like many Kenyans do, Governor Kimani Wamatangi, during the 22-23 financial period, he paid all pending bills. He's got a project called Leave No Kid Behind. He's sorting it out. And then there's some rural feeder roads, and I'm sure because you're in the urban area, you may not understand this, where a kilometer used to cost 6 million, he's reduced it to 400,000. Meaning that he has introduced professionalism, efficiency, and effectiveness in managing Kiambu. Coming up with industrial parks, coming up with health facilities. Now, if you jump from Kiambu, you go to Bungoma, you get Ken Lusaka doing an amazing job. And I wish I would say this about some more governors. But now let's go to Muranga. It's Meru. You need to have taken an energy drink and coffee, and you do 20 press-ups before you can start discussing what is happening in Meru. Because in my view, what is happening in Meru assaults all leadership principles in the world. In as much as you may say that one is not illegal, or rather you've done things which are not illegal, which are not acceptable, which are within the book, but the behavior of that governor is just unacceptable. And for Owila's colleagues who are doing a PhD and they're looking for content on a leadership study, they shouldn't even go elsewhere. They can just go to Meru and establish how not to run a county government. When you start discussing Meru, I boil over with fury that I lose my capacity to discuss, so I'll let Owila pick it up.
But what is she doing that's so wrong? Come on, Owila.
You see, that's where the problem is, yeah? That when you look at the drama in Meru, you can't sort of just pick out that this is the real problem. That this is actually what the governor is doing that is problematic. What you see is wrangles between the governor and the county assembly. So you don't even understand whether this is a wrangle that is occasioned by the fact that this is an independent governor and then the county assembly is dominated, by coalition MCAs. But this is what I would say, there are a number of female governors in this country. And what is happening in Meru is very unfortunate. No county would want to experience this kind of wrangles, where at some point it is MCAs complaining that the governor is acting unilaterally in contravention of the law, does not float all the things that she's doing through the county assembly, making unilateral appointments of friends and relatives, creating an office for the first gentleman,
yes.
And the first gentleman decided to turn it into a drama and trivialize everything. So it became more of a circus, And I want to believe that, Meru is not far from Embu. There's a very solid governor in Embu called Governor Cecily Mbariri, who has risen through the ranks in politics, from youth agenda to a nominated member of parliament. She won a seat in parliament and finally a government. A very distinguished political career. There is something she knows about political leadership. I don't think it is too much to ask, if Governor Kawira sought the audience of Governor Mbariri. There is Anne Waiguru, who is doing an amazing job in Kirinyaga, creating a wellness city in Kerugoya. They're not making a lot of noise, but if
Gladys
you dig
Wanga
deep,
as well.
Yeah, Gladys Wanga. If you dig deep, you'll find them doing an amazing job. I think this is not something that needs to be politicized. We need to understand the people of Meru for what they did. They rejected a Harvard-trained lawyer. They rejected Tikal Inturi, who had the popular political party.
Yeah.
They went for an independent candidate. We know the background of this independent candidate. A number of people have talked about this and have said, when you take a clown to the palace, you don't get you get a circus. That is what is happening. But I think, be it as it may, no one is born a perfect leader, and I think she's making very pedestrian mistakes as a political leader, and she went for a seat that tells you that even the electorate in Kenya needs to be educated. How do you, from all the choices that they had, how did they settle on this governor? Let me say that her political and mobilization prowess are out of this world. But it tells you that it is not the popularity of a politician that should land them a seat. It should be the substance that that politician has against the backdrop of the demands of that seat. A governor is not a representative. A governor is a manager. And it cuts across the country. You listen to most of the people who are elected in different parts of this country. You ask yourself, do we need to have an electoral college? Do we need to vet the people with the voters' card? And for me, what is happening in Meru is a crisis that the people of Meru created for themselves by electing, a choice that they'll have to deal with the consequences. And the best way to deal with this, because I don't think they've demonstrated enough political maturity to show us given another chance, they would make amends. So they deal with what they have.
Okay.
But I think Governor Kawira needs to just sit down, have a conversation with herself, and talk to the women governors who are doing amazing jobs here in this country.
So it's not political witch hunt from where you guys sit. This is not an issue that we've seen time and time again where MCAs are act by one issue and they decide to go after the governor.
You know, a leader who has capacity and competence, when as soon as you are declared a winner, what you do is stakeholder mapping to understand who are the key stakeholders, who are the key partners, what are the key success factors, what must I do to succeed, what must I do to succeed for the next 5 years. Kenya's got a population of about 52 million people, and you have 52 million politicians. So you must know that you're in the political space. So you must manage expectations, whether it's political expectations, leadership expectations, whatever it is. Because again, for the Meru voter, who I suspect right now are suffering from buyer's remorse or voters' remorse, they don't want to know whether Governor Kawira has called the majority leader, the minority leader, called the senator, called all the elected leaders within Meru. All they want to do is service delivery. So this idea, we are being told that the governor wakes up one day in the morning, decides to name the road after a spouse, wakes up one day in the morning, there's something called Okolea, wakes up one day in the morning, says all ills in this county are caused because people no longer pray. Mura doesn't care about those intricacies. Mura is struggling to place Gorogoro on the table. So she doesn't want, when she's selling her wares, then there's a running battle between the governor and the deputy. Mura is not interested in that. Right. So in my view, we should encourage people not to start resigning. Like if we're in another economy, Kawira should have said that out of all the elected leaders in Meru, she probably gets along with herself. Okay. So she doesn't get along with any other elected leader. So what is she doing in the office? Why can't she consult herself, the way Willa said, and then do a resignation letter? Because, you know, in as much as I'm not a resident of Meru, I'm a taxpayer, so my taxes fund all those activities in Meru. So I've got an insurable interest in the success of Meru County.
All right, briefly.
Yeah, it's only that in Meru there is no Mora, there is Kendi. Now, this...
You can't be too sure.
Yes. So this is what I think about the MCAs. You know, the DNA of MCAs is probably 90% similar among all the MCAs in this country. So the MCAs in Meru are pretty much behaving the same way as the MCAs in Kisumu, Migori, where I come from, Kirinyaga, and we are not seeing this kind of drama in any other county.
Okay.
Meaning, there's a gap in leadership. If she can't manage the different stakeholders, like Disma has said, I know stakeholder management is very simple. Just map the stakeholders in 4 quadrants. Who are the high priority stakeholders? Who are the low priority stakeholders? And then who are the ones you need to know they have interests? And what kind of interest and what kind of power, so that you know the ones that you manage and you know the ones that you have to deal with. Okay. You know. Okay. So I think that is a gap that seems to be very conspicuous in the way Governor Kawira is managing Meru, and it is incumbent upon her to learn that, you know, I cannot be the madman in the market of 47, you know, governors. There has to be something that they are doing right, which I can borrow from.
Okay, that's well noted. Of course, due process will definitely take its course. We'll see how it all rolls out. As we finalize, and briefly, let's talk about either Senate Mashinani, that's beginning tomorrow all the way to the 29th, which aims to enhance interaction between Senate and people at the grassroots level. But equally, there was a ruling at the Senate that perhaps we could spare a few minutes to talk about. The nominated Senator Gloria Roba, who was suspended for 6 months over unsubstantiated sexual abuse claims. And various people have come out to speak about this, others questioning why such decision was taken. It's been touted as one of the heaviest decisions in terms of discipline. But perhaps, do you believe this matter requires scrutiny? Should we look at how it was approached in terms of the decision that was taken after the Power and Privileges Committee took that route? What do you make of these issues? Briefly.
Yeah, well, Will has advised the Governor Kawira to look for other female governors and have a conversation. But if for some reason she's uncomfortable, she can look for her governor Matangi in Kiambu, and they have a word.
Okay.
But on the issue of you raised about this nominated senator, there's a report which has been doing rounds on social media, and we've been made to believe that it's actually an authentic document from the Senate. Those accusations are very loaded, and they approximate character assassination. So without the benefits, now in accounting you take a decision when you have full information. Now, but with the information that we have on the surface, it appears to me that she made allegations that she was unable to prove. Because when you say that the House leadership, and I need to be careful so that I also don't fall in that category, when the House leadership is requesting for some favors before behaving in a certain manner, and then you are not able to prove, then you subject the leadership into ridicule. You can easily blow up their careers. So I think there is room for her to substantiate those allegations, so that even now for Mora begins to understand what is actually happening at the Senate. Because from what she has said, we are now made to believe that if you want anything to move at the Senate, some favors must be extended. And then she said that she requested for a report on travels so that Kenyan can appreciate who does what trips. For me, I may not be very keen to know the sex of the people who are doing the trip, but I actually want to understand among all those senators elected and nominated, how many trips have they done for the last 1 year? And the way we were saying earlier on, what is the return on investment on those trips? I think for me that would be a very good accountability document for us to understand that out of all the money we give you, this is how you use it.
Okay, well noted.
Well, I mean, those are very weighty issues. And I think when sexual allegations are leveled against an individual, especially if it is a man, I think the jury is almost always, decided. They're never outside. They're always back with a determination, and I think that's why the entire Senate came down very hard on Senator Gloria, to substantiate those allegations. But let me also say this. I mean, we've interacted with Senator Gloria, and I think to a large extent, some of these things you may not have very tangible evidence on your feet. But listening to her, it seems like she was not. First of all, she was not given an opportunity to be heard robustly. And then number two, I think you can tell from the way she's responded that she was not given an opportunity to even collect what would be substantive evidence in an area where getting that robust evidence in itself is almost always impossible. But I know Senator Gloria, and I know how convicted she can be when she's on the right. And just on the basis of that, I want to believe that there is more to this, and I think it's only important that it is investigated. Building character is very difficult, and no one would want their character to just be assassinated based on mere speculations and allegations. But for someone to also just come out, they must have had a conviction, to come out on the basis of something that they strongly believe in. So, I mean, a lot needs to be, to be unveiled and to be investigated on this matter before we start casting aspersions and condemning either individuals or condemning Senator Gloria. I think it's the last thing someone would want to do, to condemn her or even to met the heavy punishment that has been meted on her simply because she has not provided tangible evidence.
Interesting. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Good analysis right there. Our time is up, unfortunately, and we have to call it a night. Always a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you so much for your input. Dismas Mukua, political risk analyst, and Hesbon Owila, communication strategist. We call it a night right here on Checkpoint. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic start to the week, and I hope you're adequately informed despite hope not being a proper strategy. My name is Jesse Rogers. Have yourself a good start to the week.
KTN News. Get the whole